When the family first moved into the old house at the edge of town, it seemed like the perfect new start. The walls were cracked, the floors creaked, and a thin layer of dust covered everything. But they thought it added character. From the first night, strange things began to happen. They heard soft whispers through the walls that no one could explain. The air was always colder in certain rooms, even though the heaters were on, and shadows moved in ways that didn't make sense. On the second night, the youngest child woke up screaming. He claimed he had seen a figure standing at the foot of his bed. The parents rushed in, but the room was empty. They tried to convince themselves it was a dream, but deep down, something felt wrong. The house seemed alive, reacting to them, watching. By the third night, footsteps echoed through the hallways. Doors slammed without anyone touching them, and faint lights flickered in rooms that were supposed to be dark. The family tried to ignore it, thinking it was just old wiring or the wind, but their nerves were fraying. Every night brought new sounds, and every morning they felt more drained, as if the house was sucking the energy from them. One evening, the father decided to investigate. He walked quietly down the narrow hallway, flashlight in hand. The floorboards groaned under each step, and a cold breeze brushed past him. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind him. Heart pounding, he turned and saw a shadow move across the wall, a tall figure, standing still, but somehow watching. He ran back to the living room, shaken, unable to explain what he had just seen. The next day, the family tried to research the house's history. They found stories of previous tenants who had left suddenly, always citing unexplainable events. Some claimed they heard voices. Others felt cold hands on their shoulders at night. The family realized that what they were experiencing wasn't just a series of coincidences. Something was haunting this place. That night, the whispers grew louder. The mother recorded the sounds on her phone, and when they played it back, they could clearly hear words. Leave. Now, the family huddled together, afraid to sleep, each creak of the house making their hearts race. They debated leaving immediately, but the father wanted to see if they could endure one more night. On the fifth night, the activity escalated. Objects moved on their own. Chairs tipped over, dishes slid across tables, and mirrors reflected shadows that weren't there. The family could barely eat, barely sleep. The house had taken over their lives. They started to feel like prisoners, trapped in a place that had been waiting for them long before. They arrived. Finally, after a week of relentless terror, they decided they could take no more. They packed their belongings and left in the dead of night. The house stood silent once more, its dark windows staring like eyes into the empty street. They never returned, and the story of the house was added to the long list of strange, terrifying tales in the town. Even now, people passing by say they can hear whispers at night, footsteps that follow no one, shadows moving in the corners of rooms. The house waits patiently, always hungry for its next occupants, ready to test their courage and sanity. The family had been looking for a new home for months when they stumbled upon the old Victorian house at the edge of town. Its paint was peeling, the roof sagged, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. But something about it drew them in. It seemed quiet, almost peaceful, and they decided to take a chance. They moved in on a cloudy afternoon, unaware of the darkness waiting for them. The first night was uneasy. The wind rattled the windows, and the old house groaned under its own weight. But then, just as they were about to sleep, soft whispers began to echo through the walls. They paused, thinking it was the neighbors or maybe the wind. But the whispers became words. Leave now. The family huddled together, unsure whether to laugh nervously or be terrified. Over the next few nights, things escalated. The youngest child started screaming in the middle of the night, claiming he had seen a shadow standing by his bed. Doors slammed on their own, and cold drafts swept through the hallways. Even though the heaters were on, the parents tried to convince themselves it was just their imagination, but the feeling of being watched never left them. On the fourth night, the father decided to investigate. With a flashlight in hand, he crept through the dim hallways. Each step made the old floorboards creak loudly. As he turned a corner, a door slammed shut in front of him. Heart racing, he aimed the flashlight at the shadowy figure that had appeared at the far end of the hall. The figure seemed to watch him, motionless, before fading into the darkness. He ran back to the living room, shaken and pale, but unable to explain what he had seen. The next day, the family tried to research the house's history. They discovered a series of mysterious disappearances spanning decades, all linked to this very home. Previous tenants had fled, claiming unexplainable events, voices, shadows, and the unbearable feeling of being watched. They realized that what they were experiencing wasn't an ordinary haunting. Something in the house was alive in a way they couldn't understand. That night, the whispers returned, louder and clearer. "You don't belong here." Objects began moving on their own. Chairs tipped over, dishes slid across the kitchen counter, and mirrors reflected figures that weren't there. The family couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and couldn't escape the suffocating presence that filled every room. They felt like prisoners in a house that thrived on fear. As days passed, the family's mental state deteriorated. The mother began sleepwalking, wandering the hallways in a trance-like state. The father awoke to find cold, unseen hands brushing across his shoulders. The child, terrified, would hide under the bed, refusing to come out. The house had taken control of their lives, twisting time and space until they could barely tell day from night. On the seventh night, the father found a hidden room behind a large bookcase. Inside, the walls were covered with old newspapers detailing strange disappearances and accounts of haunting events. A diary lay open on the floor. The entries told a story of a family long ago, tormented in the same way, until they vanished without a trace. As he read the last words, a cold gust extinguished his flashlight, plunging him into total darkness. The family realized that they had no choice. At dawn, they packed their belongings and fled. The house remained silent once more, its dark windows staring at the empty street like eyes that had seen everything. They never returned. Locals now whisper about the house. They say it waits patiently for new occupants, testing their courage, feeding on their fear, and ensuring that the cycle continues. Those brave enough to step inside claim to hear whispers, footsteps that follow no one, and shadows that move of their own accord. Even now, if you pass by on a dark night, you can feel its presence. And some say, if you listen carefully, you might hear the house calling your name, waiting for its next family to trap forever. If you want more true scary stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because you never know what might be waiting in the shadows.